Check, check, check. Welcome to the very first broadcast of Financial New. We are live. For me, it's easier to do these lives than it is to edit. So I'm just gonna read this stuff as it comes. Plus, this information is just rapid pace. So the time it takes to edit this stuff out, I'll have like 10 more things to talk about. Waste of time. So I'm just gonna kick it live. We live. Let's run it. Shout out to the team. Let's get this thing started. Now, you guys are gonna have to go to Newell's Garage real quick and peep the lives there, as we were waiting to become official on this YouTube channel. We cannot, we had to wait 24 hours anyways. So we're here now. We were talking. Did I set this up right? Financial New live stream. I didn't really set this up right. Can I do an edit while I'm here? All right, guys, we're just gonna do a pre-on-air edit. I had to get some of the material. Make sure you guys know what we're talking about. The Don Frank section, 1073 Cross-Border Remittance Transfer. I did go through a lot of this in the previous. I really don't want to go through it again because we did make some headways, but a quick synopsis. The purpose of this is so we can have a regulatory framework governing the cross-border electronic transfer of payments originating from the U.S. customers to anywhere else in the world. All right, that's just a synopsis. We were then looking at the scope of things and how that worked out. And let me turn my mic up a bit because I was not liking the sound. So, scope. I guess we'll start here because I guess you guys weren't there before. So I'm going to start off with the scope, tag along, and we'll go from there. Oh yeah, I was actually supposed to do some work, wasn't I? Bum 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 bum. So thank you again for joining me on this first broadcast. Excuse me. We're going to try to be official. You're going to get your source information. This is not my words. This is not for me to respond to tell you what to think. I am just giving you what's on the screen. I'm going to give you my personal feelings. This is not legal advice. I am not a guru. I am not your ambassador or was it an influencer. Yo, think for yourself, bro. But I'll give you my perspective. And you can tell me what you think about it, because you thought for yourself. That's what's important. Don't go be looking at my shout out to the team, Mr. Man. Give thanks. Once again, we're at the scope of things. Did I finish work? No, I'm still working. Came down here. Gotta get into my private business. I don't know if I should show you this. I'm going ghost. Just give me 1 second, y'all. I'll edit this out in post if y'all are hearing this. All right, I think we are good to go for now. All right, we're back. All right, let's get into it. All right, we over here. No, we're over here. We're over there. We scope it out. I don't need to see myself. I don't need to see all that. I can get into the documentation. So, scope. The obligation created by this regulation applies only to international electronic payments originated by United States national persons and are for personal, households, and family use. They are not applied to payments originated by U.S. corporation clients, for transfers funded from an account, EI not funded by cash, so they don't want cryptocurrency to be funding these accounts. The funding account must be located in the United States. So again, you have to originate in the United States, and then it has to be anywhere outside. The recipient of the payment must be located in the foreign country for transfer sent to the account. This means that the recipient account must be located in the foreign country. For cash pickup transfers, this means the pickup location is in the foreign country. The recipient can be a natural person, corporation, or government entity. So anyone can get your money, but only a natural persons that are for personal, household, or family use, right? So I can't do business with this account, but I can pay businesses with the account. All right. Corporate entities. The regulation applies to any consumer entity, international electronic transfer above $15. So anything smaller than that, this regulation does not apply, including those that are traditionally executed through corresponding relationships, utilizing SWIFT local real-time gross settlement, the RTGS, and other high-value cleaning systems. So this is what a cleaning system is. Utilizing SWIFT's local real-time gross settlement is considered a high-value cleaning system, also known as a funds transfer, money transfer, or a wire transfer. Okay. So that process of getting a wire transfer is known as a high-value cleaning system process. It applies to international ACH payments, closed networks remittance payments, online bills, push payments to foreign payees, and load onto certain prepaid cards and loads onto, okay, so I guess if you have a prepaid Visa, prepaid debit card, and again, it's you're in the city and you're, I guess you're loading it out of state. I don't know how that works. Not my concern at the moment. So or that push, load into certain prepaid cards, payroll cards account, and government benefit accounts. Right. So I guess, but then if. Okay, cool. The obligation of this regulation applies to any provider of international transfer service located in the United States that sends more than a de-minimized amount of cross-border consumer transfer. Besides, providers that send 500 or fewer consumer initiated international electronic transfers in the prior year, and 500 or fewer such transfers in the current year are exempt from this requirement or rule. So again, if you're not doing a high volume of business, you're not being subjugated to this sanction 1073. So you little small guys, this is not for you. You got to do more than 500. How much for the year? Transact more for the year, more than 500 transactions. Which works out to about 41 a month, or 166 a week. 23 a day. So unless your business is not, or unless you're, didn't say business, it's a family household. Unless your family household is not conversing more than 23 transactions per day. Interesting. Okay, I'm just gonna keep on reading. Besides, money transfer businesses and regulations also apply to domestic. Oh, so this regulations then is for the people that are moving the money. For household. All right. Anyways, moving on. I'll learn some more. Don't let me quote me. I'll learn. Money transfer businesses. The regulations also apply to domestic United States depository financial institutions, bank, credit unions, saving banks, etc., broker dealers, as well as subsidiary or foreign banks in the United States that provide an international payment service to United States consumers. These are collectively referred to in the paper as United States remittance transfer providers. So, again, I think this law is really for these providers so that they can meet the requirements of individuals and their households. But I'm learning. Disclose requirements. Disclosure requirements. Doug Frank 1073 requires that the United States remittance transfer providers present a consumer with two disclosed documents. The first, known as a prepayment disclosure. This is to provide to the consumers, at the first time that the consumer requests an international electronic payment, but before the consumer pays or authorize it. So we gotta tell them what's going on before we say okay. Second, known as the receipt disclosure, generally must be provided to the consumer at the time that the consumer pays or authorizes the transfer. Provider authorized the transfer. The following table outlines the information required with each disclosure. So if I understand this correctly, like you go up to Western Union, they'll be like, hey, you want to do whatever you want to do. It's going to be this much. It's going to be that much. It's going to be that much. You're going to be like, all right, cool. I want to do that. That's the first disclosure. You sign off on that. You pay for that. After you pay for that, you then get a receipt of that having had done. But let's read on of what they say it is. Payment disclosure. Transfer amount. Originating amounts in funded currencies. Fee charges by the U.S. remittance transfer provider and associated domestic taxes. Right? So the transfer amount originated by the funded currency. So in other words, I guess funded currency. In the funded currency. So again, if you're going, so if I'm transferring it to wherever, this is Western Union. This is Western Union. Sorry. So if I'm transferring money back to Trinidad, because I want to take care of my peeps, or they're going to disclose the amount, the fees and charges for that U.S. remittance, as the provider is going to have it, and the domestic taxes, so whatever state that I'm in, that's going to have to be on this payment of disclosure. This is the foreign exchange rate by which the payment will be converted, regardless of which bank converts it. So what rate is the money being converted to? So today it's like $1, what is it? $1, I can't even think of it, how you do it. It's going to take $62 for one. Is that right? Yeah, $62 for every one Canadian dollar. 6-to-1 ratio. There we go. All converted third-party fees. All covered third-party fees imposed in the payment chain. So as we discussed before, there are other individuals that are within this chain of events that impose their own fees and their own schedules. That also has to be taken into consideration. The gold, of certain other products that are coming out is to remove these fees, remove those individuals that are in the way, and go more direct. As again, it has to be disclosed in this payment document what fees will be incurred before you agree upon it. And then finally, the amount to be received by the beneficiary in the receipt in the recipient currency, receipt currency. So in other words, how much you're going to pay in your money. So I'm going to pay $20 US. How much am I going to receive in Trinidad? I said 6 to 1, so let's call it $60 US. All right. If that works out. I mean, $60 TT for my $20 US. To whatever beneficiary I'm sending it to. Auntie. Now, this is before I say yes. Now, after I say yes, a reinstated information included in the prepayment disclosure. All right, so you're just gonna really just copy over everything onto this receipt. This is what we did. The promissory date to deliver country in the delivered country of delivered to the recipient. So when will it get to the country of the recipient, and when will they have access to it? The name of the account, the name, the account number, the contact information, phone number, address of the recipient if provided. Error resolution rights. So in other words, if something happens, they're supposed to give you a remedy to resolve it. And then contact information, the U.S. Contact information for the U.S. remittance transfer provider to that provides state regulatory and the CFPB toll-free number for consumers complaint. So contact information for this. So now you have to also make sure that the information, so we the customer can contact the regulatory board, the U.S. Remittance Transfer provider, right, and provides a state regulatory number. And yeah, so basically this is where I can contact the legal board if something does go wrong. The people I'm working with should be running a certain standard, and thus I can remedy it because everyone is on this what are we on? Dodd 1070 what is it? 10, I don't want to misquote it. 1073. Converted and non-converted third-party fees. Understanding the difficulties, the U.S. remittance transfer providers have in determining or estimating all fees in the payment chain, and especially final beneficiary bank fees. Oh yeah, because the receiving bank are going to have their own fees as well. The rules designated between covered fees and non-covered fees. The U.S. remittance transfer provider are obligated to disclose covered third-party fees, which include 1. Intermediary fees that are deducted from the amount of the payment, more commonly referred to as lifting fees, beneficiary deducted fees, or credit deduction fees. And 3. It's 3. These would include fees mostly common deducted by intermediary banks, but may also include fees deducted by the beneficiary's banks. If such a fee is deducted in their capital as the intermediary clearing institution outside of any commercial agreement they may have with the beneficiary. So these fees are outside of the agreement that me and you may have because we're doing business on other people's with other people's technology basically, and they want to get paid. So they have no control over it basically. And 2, so again, what must be disclosed? Fees and the final beneficiary bank may charge if acting as an agent of the U.S. remittance transfer provider. Yeah, we know that. 4. Agent. Agency is not defined in the rules, and the CFPBC has said agencies is determined by the local laws. Hence, in this context of the new final rules, agency is being interpreted by the industry to mean closed network agents or their equivalent in terms of contractual control. It is generally not interpreted to mean foreign financial institutions from whom the U.S. remittance transfer provider has established by a traditional correspondence or nostrum cleaning relationship. Okay. Non-covered third-party fees, which the United States remittance transfer provider does not need to disclose, are limited to the fees of the beneficiary bank may charge for the application of the credit to the beneficiary's account based upon the standard terms or commercial agreement with the beneficiary. So basically, whatever the bank and that person had an agreement of, yo, when your money comes, what we're going to do, that's what's going to happen. From the particular perspective, this means that the New York final rules narrowed the third-party fees disclosure requirement to any fees deducted by intermediary banks, domestic or foreign, which processing payments instruction advised by the U.S. remittance transfer provider when the BEN debt or the SHA charging code. In addition, the international foreign banks lifting fee deductions that may occur, they also include the following categories. Right? Because now we're saying, yeah, we're taking deductions, but which type of deduction? So the first type of deduction, number 1, fee deducted by domestic U.S. intermediaries, such as would be the case if a smaller U.S. remittance transfer provider aligned themselves of correspondence payments, align themselves of correspondent payment services of a large U.S. financial institution. 2, fees deducted by a U.S. remittance transfer provider or their intermediary based upon credit deduction agreements they may have with foreign beneficiary banks who utilize the U.S. institution's U.S. dollar cleaning service. I like the way they word this thing, cleaning service, man. It sounds suspect. Whatever, it's legal. As discussed in more detail in the exceptions and estimates section of this paper, U.S. remittance transfer providers are allowed to estimate covered third-party fees in certain situations. Yeah, because they don't really know what they're going to get paid. They may change. Today's price isn't yesterday's price. You understand me? All right. Foreign currency rate disclosure. Under certain circumstances, the U.S. remittance transfer provider may not need to disclose the foreign exchange rate applied to the payment. Applicable to the payment. The U.S. remittance transfer provider needs to disclose the rate if they have significant knowledge that the foreign exchange conversion will take place. So if they know that you're going to have to change the the currency. They have to disclose it. According to the regulations, if the United States remittance provider does not have specific knowledge of the currency that the beneficiary needs to receive, the provider may rely on the U.S. Customs representation regarding the currency in which the funds may be received by the beneficiary. So the U.S. customary representation already has some, documentation that we can use as guidelines. If the U.S. consumer state that the beneficiary account is denominated in a different currency than the finding currency, the provider must disclose the foreign exchange rate. If the U.S. consumer does not know if the recipient's account is denominated in a different currency, then the finding currency, the provider may assume that the recipient currency is the same as the funding currency, in which case no foreign exchange rate needs to be disclosed. Period. So if you're sending money to an individual and they have a US based account in that foreign state, then there is no exchange rate that needs to be disclosed on the document. But if I'm sending it again to Auntie and she only has available TT dollars, then from my understanding of that paragraph, then the exchange rate needs to be disclosed. While there are different approaches to determine whether a foreign exchange or an FX disclose needs to be provided, most U.S. remittance providers may opt to specifically ask the U.S. customer during this transfer originating process if the customer knows the exchange of the beneficiary needing to receive or the currency of the beneficiary's amount denominated in. Let me just get that word correct. Just want to make sure I say it properly. All right, because I hate saying things and then I realize I've been saying it wrong the whole time and no one told me. I just allowed it to happen. Thanks, team. Denominated. Got it close. Denominated. Swift. And the beneficiary's account is denominated in. As an example above, in the event that the United States consumer response indicates that the currency, in the event that the U.S. consumer response indicates that the currency the beneficiary needs to receive is different than the funding currency, the U.S. remittance transfer provider will know that the foreign exchange conversion will occur. That's pretty straightforward. If the United States consumer states that the current currency the beneficiary needs to receive in US dollars, the US dollar remittance provider may decide to execute the transfer in USD without converting it. In the event the US consumer was incorrect and the foreign exchange conversion was conducted by another bank, the U.S. remittance provider may claim they determined the currency of the transfer based upon the representation of the U.S. consumer, and as such would not need to remedy any foreign exchange rate related errors, because you said this is what it was going to be. I didn't know any better. That's the information I provided. Why are you blaming me for it? You told me to do it. Now, two, if the U.S. consumer states that the currency of the beneficiary needs to receive is the beneficiary local currency or any currency other than the funding currency, the U.S. remittance transfer provider will most likely opt to perform a foreign exchange conversion themselves, executing the transfer in the foreign currency. If the provider executes in the foreign currency, it will have the inherent ability to disclose the accurate foreign exchange rate. So in other words, if the transfer the provider of the funds, if they are doing it for you and they're providing the transfer, they can give you a more accurate rate. But if they now have to rely on a third party outside member, they are not guaranteed the same rate, or you are the consumer not guaranteed the rate that they may have imposed to you. It may be less, maybe more times is not. So you gotta understand that has the ability to happen. When they're saying basically, if you get it from the person that you're exchanging and they can do it for you, then you're more likely to get a proper exchange rate. Finally, if the United States consumer does not know any currency that the beneficiary needs to receive, the regulation states that the provider may assume the currency the beneficiary needs to receive will be the same as the funding currency, in which case no currency exchange is needed to be disclosed. This may mean that in most cases where the United States consumer cannot make currency representation, the payment will be executed in USD dollars, since most U.S. financial institutions only offer USD deposit accounts to consumer clients. In the event another bank has to convert the payment in order to apply the funds to the beneficiary, again, the U.S. remittance transfer provider does not have any error resolution liability related to foreign exchange rate disclosure. So we didn't tell you that this was going to be the rate and now your money's different. Well, we didn't have to, because you didn't tell us that person's account wasn't going to be what it was. You made the assumption it was a USD. It wasn't. We now have to apply this rate. Cancellation and error resolution. The regulation also outlines rights, obligation, and timeline regarding cancellation, the investigation of disputes and error, and specific remedies in the event of an error. The timeline of these rights are as followed: 20 minutes. U.S. economy. So error resolutions, we have 30 minutes, 120 days, 90 days. How come they did it like that? Okay. Some 30 minutes resolution. The U.S. consumer will have 30 minutes from the time they make a payment or an authorization of transfer to cancel that payment if the transfer funds have not been picked up by the designated recipient or deposited into the account of the designated recipient, which will typically be in the case of a remittance transfer sent to a bank using correspondent relationships. The U.S. remittance provider must refund the consumer within 3 days of receiving the cancellation request all amounts paid for the transfer. However, as in particular matters, refunding will not be necessary for accounts-based transfers, as most U.S. remittance providers will hold a transfer for 30 minutes before releasing it. Hence, if the U.S. consumer cancels the transfer, the held transfer will be canceled and no funds will have been deducted from the U.S. consumer's account, so the refund is unnecessary. So they basically hold, they don't take your funds immediately. I guess they put a hold on it, and if you cancel, they just release the hold. $180 days. 180 days. Consumers also have up to 180 days from the disclosure date of funds ability. Let me try it again. Consumers also have 180 days from disclosed date of the funds availability to assess an error. There are two main forms of errors. One, amount error, which occurs when the recipient receives less or more than disclosed amount to be received. Two, delay error, which occurs when the fund arrives late than the disclosed date or did not arrive at all. So after 180, whoa, that's a long time. Oh, you have up to. Have up to, okay. The remittance provider. After 90 days now, the U.S. remittance provider has up to 90 days from the date of assertion to investigate an error. Upon conclusion of the investigation, the U.S. remittance provider has 3 business days within which they need to notify the U.S. consumer of their conclusion, and if there was an error, inform the U.S. consumer of the available remedy. So hey, they have 90 days to say we made a mistake. Hey, we have a problem. After 90 days, it's wash. An amount error. For an amount error, the U.S. consumer may choose for the U.S. remittance provider to either refund the amount appropriate to resolve the error or send a second transfer to the recipient in the amount appropriate to resolve the error at no additional cost to the U.S. consumer. Delay error. A U.S. remittance provider must refund all fees applied to the transfer, including fees, charges, and other entities, charges by other entities. So if they lose or take too long, which is more than 90 days, yeah, interesting. Doug Frank 1073 amended the Electronic Funds Transfer Act, the EFTA, with a new section dedicated to the remittance transfer. This section of the EFTA and the rules override the UCC 4A and generally adopted uniform state law applicable to wires for the past 30 years. To extend the UCC 4A is inconsistent. Inconsistent. All right, where are we? Yeah, a few more paragraphs. You guys really wanted me to finish read all of this? Let's finish read all of this, because I'm dedicated to the cause. For delays. Longstanding payment identification according to USC4, as well as foreign regulations. Primary identifier for the beneficiary of this beneficiary account, such as longstanding rules, has been the amount numbered over the beneficiary name. That am I missing? The rules replace the UCC4A approach with respects to the original error related to the beneficiary account number and the beneficiary bank account identification. Specification and rules only protect the provider from abilities for a sender originated error with respects to a recipient beneficiary amount if certain preconditions are met. In the event the U.S. remittance transfer provider does not fulfill these preconditions, the provider may be liable for any losses that would occur if the funds are paid to the wrong beneficiary or the wrong beneficiary bank. Exceptions and estimations, exceptions and All right, the rules provides and exceptions that permit U.S. insured depository financial institutions to estimate the exchange rate for a remittance transfer to a particular country if among other things, the insured institution made 1,000 or fewer remittance transfer in the prior calendar year of that country. With respects to converting third-party fees, the rules permits insured institutions to establish converted third-party fees for a remittance transfer to a designated recipient institution if, among other things, the insurer institution made 500 or fewer remittance transfers to that designated recipient institution in the prior calendar year. This is where it gets muddy. Ugh. All right. Exceptions and estimations. The Dodd 1073 defines 1 temporary and 2 permanent exceptions that allow the U.S. remittance transfer provider to estimate some of these disclosed data under certain circumstances. The temporary exception of the U.S. government insured depository financial institutions permits estimates of a certain disclosure of transfers in which exact amounts are unknown for reasons beyond the sender's institution control. And again, I believe this is why they want to kind of regulate these fees, because like I said, it's an estimation that man has to do. Among the data that may be estimated under the temporary exemption of the FX rate, converted third-party fees and any other disclosed amounts are dependent upon estimated exchange rates or converted third-party fees. However, estimates are not allowed for foreign exchange rates or covered third-party fees if the U.S. remittance provider has a corresponding relationship with the foreign bank that sets the rate or fee. So if you have a relationship, you guys need to correlate. The regulations does not define a corresponding relationship, but the official interpretation of the regulations indicates a regulator exception that U.S. remittance transfer providers can adjust contractual agreements with foreign banks with which they have corresponded relations also act so that accurate FX rates and fee information are provided to the U.S. remittance provider. I hope y'all got that. The regulators are not defining it, right? But they are stating in the regulations that it needs to happen. The rules also permit the U.S. remittance provider to estimate foreign exchange rates and the amount depending upon the U.S. The amount depending upon the foreign exchange rate. Let me use that again. The rules also permit U.S. remittance providers to estimate foreign exchange rates and amounts dependent upon foreign exchange rates. Okay, I understand what they're saying. So they can estimate the rate and how much you're going to pay. Such as the transfer amount in the recipient currency in other limited circumstances. The first of these exceptions applies to transfers to countries that have foreign exchange control laws, prevent a U.S. remittance provider from knowing the foreign exchange rate at the time that disclosure must be provided. The second of these exemptions apply to certain international ACH services offering by the Federal Reserve Bank. All right, September 12th, the CFPB published a list of safe harbor countries that the agency has determined have the currency control laws that prevent a U.S. remittance provider from knowing the foreign exchange rates that will be applied to a transfer. The countries on the list are Aruba, Brazil, China, Ethiopia, Libya. Since 2012, the CFBP has also added any additional countries to the list. Providers may estimate the foreign exchange rate and any amounts depending upon the foreign exchange rate when they send transfers to these countries. So because these countries don't want to do business with the United States as such and don't want to freely give exchange rate information, I don't understand how it works. They're on a list. Number 6. Where's number 6? I think I read over number 6. What was number 6? You didn't see number 6 on this thing. Anyways, number 6, the preconditions include advertising the United States consumer before they pay for the transfer that an incorrect account or identifier institution may result in the loss of funds, and using a reasonable available means to confirm that the institution identifier matches the name of the beneficiary institution. These preconditions are generally considered to be reasonable and feasible by U.S. banks. So basically, they're supposed to let you know that, hey, it's not our fault. All right, we got one more major page, and that's it. Appendixes available to United Remittance Transfer Provider payment practices based upon the remittance of the rules of United States remittance providers. Transfer providers may also certain payment practices in order to allow them better comply with the requirements of the rules. The PMPG does not define these practices as market practice guidelines and only provides them in documents as an inventory of the other PMPG communities to be aware of. In using the code words /CCT yo, these are too much, bro. When agreements with foreign banks or banks, the United States remittance transfer providers may elect to utilize the code CCT to identify payments that require compliance with the Dodd forward section. So they're going to be using the code word to make sure that this is being done, so that it has all the information that it's looking for. The foreign banks may brutally agree bilaterally agreement. Sorry, bilateral. That's what I was looking for. When a bilateral agreement with a foreign country or bank, a United States remittance provider may be elected to utilize a code CCT, identifying the payment that requires the compliance with the Dodd-Frank section 1074. The foreign bank may bilaterally agree to recognize CCT field 26T is recommended. Bilaterally agreement to honor this identification of the customer's payment, which such of a code word may include any of the following provisions. Specified lifting fees, special lifting fees and prices for customers' payments in the event of bilateral agreement between United States remittance providers and intermediaries. B, exchanges in foreign currencies by the intermediaries or beneficiary bank at the predetermined static day rate or spread, and specific lending or return unavailable to apply other investigations, special handling of returns unavailable to apply or other investigation states. Let's keep pushing, guys. Under the category purpose code CTDF, the bilateral agreement for foreign banks or banks, the U.S. remittance transfer provider may elect to utilize the category purpose code, the CTDF, to identify payments required compliance with the Dodd forward agreement. The foreign banks may bilateral agreement with the CT. Okay, cool. And this lifting fee, again, and the same thing. So they got two different codes for different banks. You can use either one. If the CT category purpose code is received on the CDR message, that may be sent to the next third party via the MT or the Fed wire during a code existence period category. So basically it's saying that it has all the accurate information. When they receive this blockage of information, it can just be passed through, as there's no holding of the information, because it's already been pre-approved to have all the information there, so it doesn't need to be packaged and set aside to be looked at later. So I'm reading this document. Use cover payment. Certain United States remittance transfer providers may select to execute their customers' originated foreign payment using a covered payment method. This means that the U.S. remittance provider would send a direct MT100 PAX.008 to the final beneficiary bank, while only sending a bank-to-bank cover payment through intermediary banks, either a chip or Fed wire transfer, BTR, CR, SWIFT, and under a covered payment method, since foreign correspondents would not deduct lift fees from the bank-to-bank transfer. So that's why they want the code, so that you're not lifting fees off of the transfer. It can stay as it is. Remittance transfers providers would efficiently eliminate the possibility to cover fees from even occurring. Use of our debt charge code instructions. In the event of the U.S. remittance transfer provider cannot execute a payment as a cover payment, they may opt to execute the payment advising the other debt charge code. This too would effectively eliminate the possibility of a cover fee from even occurring. Our debt cover charge code instructions may essentially be more common on payments executed from the U.S. in a foreign currency, since they are typically settled through SWIFTs, enabling foreign neutral corresponding banks. So again, that code, they're like, yo, don't touch our money. Converting the payments in the United States, converting conversations of the payments in the United States in order to be able to disclose the foreign exchange rate at which a payment may be converted. The United States remittance transfer provider may consider converting the payment into the currency of the beneficiary's account in the United States and executing the payment in the foreign currency. So in other words, they do the transfer for you, but in US dollars, and then they deal with it on the other side. Foreign correspondents should work with the United States Bank, and they're doing that because they have that code and they can get away with the charges. The foreign correspondent should work with the United States Bank's partners towards obtaining the future information related on how the Dodd-Frank will affect their payment relationships and its related processing requirements. Contact so-and-so. Y'all, that was intense. That was thicker than I thought. Woo! Let's all right. So, what I can gather, they want to make sure the payments that are going across borders are being done with as minimal slippage. They don't want to say it, but I'm going to say it. Slippage. They want as minimal slippage as possible. That way they can just get money. Make it easier for the consumer to transfer over funds, because they're like, yo, less slippage. And with that, more money. So I'm going to close it off there. Thanks again for joining me. I will see you guys on the next one. That was interesting. What do you guys have to think about that? Was that worthwhile reading through? All right, that's what I thought. Thank you once again for joining me. I got to set up I need some more height. And we'll talk to you guys later. Give thanks. Push some buttons. Let me know how you feel. Was my mic off? No, my mic was on.